Hi there, and welcome to the fourth episode of All Things Considered. All Things Considered is a South African podcast that explores the contours of African life through the research of young African scholars in the humanities. My name is Ol'Things, and I am an academic philosopher by profession from the University of Cape Town, and I am your host. So, about a couple of weeks ago, we saw some drama unfolding that made headlines where effectively after a Zulu gay couple got married and was wearing their traditional attire, was this cultural expert
Yeah, it's
or
custodian.
custodian of the culture,
Yeah.
Ngizwe Mchunu, was extremely outraged by the couple, right? Effectively, even was this a march to
Yeah.
my, right? In order to exercise queer people from Zulu culture, right? In some way or another. So there was this kind of idea of wanting to protect Zuluness from gay men in some way. So I think this kind of brings us into certain questions, including whether our viewers have considered why so many South Africans remain homophobic, even with a liberal constitution that we have currently, right? And what is it about queerness and African cultures that elicits such violent, visceral responses from people, right? But even regardless of this, have we considered why it is that nonetheless queer people choose to carry on and negotiate their queerness with their cultures? And I am joined today by Zamokuhle Zulu, right? Who is a scholar, activist, as you say, you use a double-barrel title, scholar activist, who is interested in using Isintu Zulu, right? In order to promote and secure the well-being of same-sex attracted individuals and people of different genders in Southern Africa, right? And as I'm aware, you are also someone who is currently completing their master's, right?
Yes.
Doing it in the Decolonial Feminist Hub.
It's interdisciplinary. So I'm putting together African feminist studies and psychology, but my home is the Hub for Decolonial Feminist Psychologies in Africa.
Lovely, lovely. So how do we make sense rather of the Ngizwe Mchunus of the world and, the strong opposition to queer people exercising their cultural rights? What would you make of that?
Oh, that is a big question.
It's a big question to start on, by the way, but
let's go through it. Let's go through it. I think engaging with the content or seeing and actually listening to Ngizwe, trying to understand what is it that Baba is protesting about. And I found there's two things with like two main arguments. The first one is that one of the men getting married was wearing imvunulo yamakhosi.
Can you explain what that is?
Imvunulo yamakhosi essentially is a type of regalia that is reserved for the royal family. Not anyone can wear it. It's only reserved for certain people in a particular social class within the Zulu hierarchy of families, And then the second one was that the same-sex couple were wearing imvunulo and getting married, so that it was tainting it, and by extension tainting Zulu culture and Zuluness, And for me, I found it really interesting that these two were intermarried within the public discourse, even in the comments, even in just what the public had to say, by the conversation that was initiated by Ngizwe. And
wait, so let me stop you there. So when you're saying these two things, you're meaning the fact that they were wearing something that's reserved for a particular class of people, and what's the other aspect?
And the other aspect is that they were wearing imvunulo, same-sex couples, and getting married. So by getting married or doing homosexuality, they were somehow tainting Zuluness and Zulu culture, the sacredness of imvunulo. And I found it interesting that these two conversations were merged somehow, because now unpacking it for myself, I understand and I hear the first part, but then a question that I asked myself is, but why now? Imvunulo yamakhosi is sold. You can get it in multiple places. It's expensive, but it's sold, and a lot of heterosexual men I've seen
who get married wear it. They can find it at Istolo, like somewhere, at the markets. Why is it then sold if it's not kind of meant for...
Exactly. And also, why was there no outrage when heterosexual men or men who are getting married to women? Because I'm still also contesting the idea of this whole heterosexual, homosexual binary. But men who are getting married to women,
where was the outrage?
There was no outrage. So then I'm like, okay, Ubaba has a point, but then I feel like this is now unfair, because why do you keep quiet when all the other things, because imvunulo comes in categories for who gets to wear what, and it's been people have been navigating that and stretching the boundaries, I guess, putting creativity into it, and those could also be read as misusing imvunulo in all its diversity, but there was no outrage. So then now I'm like, okay, there might be something underlying to this. And the second part is the idea, and I think we articulated it in multiple spheres, that in Dotelala, so a man who has sex with another man should not wear imvunulo. And from there, I was like, okay, but what does this mean? Essentially, because I look at imvunulo in two parts also, because imvunulo is sacred within
and that's
Isintu, right? And we understand and we acknowledge the what imvunulo means and what it means to wear it, and the sacredness and the spirituality around imvunulo. But also, imvunulo was at once upon a time an everyday attire. It was a everyday attire. That's what our ancestors used to wear. And for me, that goes back to the assumption that our ancestors, our Zulu ancestors, were all quote unquote heterosexual, right?
And also the fact that only heterosexual Zulu ancestors wore these kind of things. If this attire was broadly worn by every single person who was at least gendered male, right, in that culture, then surely it was the attire for everyone, not even just a particular kind of individual.
Exactly. Which for me goes back to the erasure of what we may call queer ancestors, because in assuming that only heterosexual ancestors wore this and we need to preserve the heterosexuality of the Zulu culture, comes with the underlying assumption that, but then what about the ones who are not so straight, quote unquote, And for me, that was just some of the things that were really interesting within the public discourse. Going into what do I now, what conclusion did I come to, is that the outrage seems to be centered around the hatred or this visceral feeling one gets when they see a same-sex couple existing.
So even just the existence kind of is already upsetting. But now the existence within the culture, or in interplay with the culture, becomes even more like, outrage inducing for a lot of people, you would say.
I think that is a big one. How dare you want a place in culture? How dare you want to cement yourself within a family? How dare you want to belong? I think for me, those are like the underlying messages within the public, within what we see, these homophobic messages and the anger and the backlash. It's how dare you want to belong? How dare you want to claim your culture as a Zulu person?
And that time, it shouldn't be so kind of mind-boggling, because this person was born into the culture.
Yeah.
They were born into the culture, so how dare we not want to accord them their cultural rights that everyone else has? I think that's the other kind of way of framing it. But I think there's a deeper, perhaps more theoretical question about what is it that for so many people troubles African culture about what about queerness rather seems to trouble African culture, but according to so many people, what do you think that's rooted in?
I feel this is a really interesting question, and I love it because I want to argue African culture is queer. And by this, I am moving beyond looking at queerness as same-sex couples, as people having sex, but looking at queerness as a stance of resistance against the norm. You know, living in post-colonial apartheid South Africa, practicing your culture, choosing to remember it when so much has been done to try to remove it, to try to make us hate our culture, to try to make us hate ourselves and our ways of doing and living and healing and loving, and you choose to still embrace your culture. That resistance for me is queer. Looking at it particularly also within the Zulu culture, understanding that the Zulu culture is a collection of a number of different cultures. It's not just one thing. It's multiple. It brings it together a number of cultures, of
ways
customs,
of lives,
ways of life, ways of dressing, ways of talking, you know? So the singularity, but at the same time multiplicity is queer.
It's even internal. And I think that's kind of like pointing more generally to the fact that there is, in the right sense of the word, there was no really one way to be Zulu at some point, right? It was a manifestation, a collectivity of different clusters of ways of being that are brought together, you know?
And I went into the research looking for the Zulu culture and where do same-sex couples place themselves within this. But then what I found was, first of all, wait, this Zulu culture you are imagining in your head does not exist because culture in how it's practiced is different according to region. So people in the north, perhaps let's say in Mpumalanga, and someone in Newcastle, and someone in Pietermaritzburg, and someone in KZN, in Durban, are not doing the same thing. Within those regions, the different individuals' families are not doing the same thing. So it first had me have to trouble the idea of this one unified culture, which is when I moved away from culture and thinking more of Isintu, you know, because going into my research asking, what is Isintu in its most basic understanding, you know? And it's just the people's way of doing things. It's simple as that. The people's way of doing things. And the people's way of doing things also changes across time. It differs.
According to region, as well, as you just said.
Also, even across time. So a family might do a thing and then something changes and then it doesn't. A nation might do a thing and then after a certain point they find, okay, this is no longer serving us. Let's pivot. It is still Isintu. It's not as rigid as the word culture wants to cement it, you know? So that is where I started, you know?
No, actually, you know what I wanted to touch on, maybe to just, you know, capitalize on what you just said. I get a sense that when you are speaking about how Isintu itself is something that, you know, is able to pivot, is able to move through time, is able to be adjusted, has shown itself to be that way as well. Like, you know, historically and currently, you know, I think it also then, you know, gives us way to understand the place of queerness as it manifests in terms of like same-sex attraction in this case, right? It gives us a way to understand its place as something that could also potentially be part of the expansion and the pivoting and the and the movement, the mobility of Isintu, right? Because in some senses, it's like, especially if, you find queer couples, same-sex attracted couples coming together, being like, we do want to make our marriage a possibility in this culture. And we are trying to, in some way, you know, engage our cultures in the rather Isintu. Let me actually use that term as you said. We want to engage Isintu in its very nature of being something that is able to adjust, to different situations, right? But there's still like this desire to say, let's see where Isintu can go. Let's see where Isintu can go. Let's not assume that Isintu requires certain kind of particular things. Let's actually even think about what it is about Isintu that is important to preserve as we continue to move through the kind of pivotings and the slight changes and the slight kind of adjustments that Isintu has proven to go through throughout history anyway, So I think there is a question more deeply maybe that we'll return to, a question about whether heterosexuality and to some extent gender binarisms, right, are as essential a part of Isintu as people make them to be, But I think let's park that.
Okay.
Go into, because you touched also a bit on when you were going into the research, when you're doing your research going into the field. Because I think it's important for people to get a sense of the work that you've done, and mainly because I want people to know that this is not just you speaking as Zamokuhle Zulu, who is, but someone who has brought in certain other perspectives that were important, has brought in the life experiences of people. So can you give us a sense of when you were doing your research on how same-sex couples negotiated their place, right, in cultural rights like marriage rights in Zulu culture, can you give us a sense of how you design your research, how you went about it, and all those kind of things?
I enjoyed. So I think it was like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I started the project of questioning.
Mm-hmm. What are the questions?
The question was, how do same-sex couples get married?
According
Also,
to Isintu.
according to Isintu, the research itself was a very personal experience. Because I was in a relationship with a same-sex partner at the time. And it was very hard to articulate this within my methodology, which is something that I'm trying to do more explicitly as I go forward in what does it mean to be a Black researcher doing research, because the research was personal in the sense of it started as a question for myself, to abantu abadala, my ancestors, and to be like, okay, clearly you'll acknowledge that I'm with a same-sex person at the moment. And now you are telling me that there's some contestation with the idea of wanting to buy a house together. Because we have not been informed and we have not done the things that we need to do to acknowledge what you are doing right now with this human being that you're doing it with. And I said, okay, but what do I do? And I started to ask the question, but then at the time I had not seen a same-sex couple get married traditionally. And I'm like, but what is abantu abadala? Like,
Bathini.
Like, what is this? So it led me to now asking people, people close to me, people who know more about culture, to say, but have you heard of this before? Is this even possible? How? What?
How do we do this? How do we go on?
Yeah. And that somehow got intertwined with me returning back into the academy. I went in to my postgraduate with this question that was burning, I guess.
Mm.
I first looked for people who went through the process because I found, okay, there should be.
Somebody
I
has
put out a
done
post.
this.
I'm like, if you've ever done it before, come tell me, what did you do? And most importantly for me, what did you say to your ancestors? Because like, what is the process? And what did you say to your ancestors?
Can you just explain briefly like this notion of going to Msamo?
So Zamo essentially is the sacred place within a Zulu household where we can equate it to a shrine where people go to connect with their ancestors, to speak to their ancestors, to ask, and if there's any ceremonies, it starts from there. So it's the anchor of the household.
That's right.
You know?
Okay.
So I was like, what was said in Zamo?
When you wanted to get married as a same-sex couple, because I mean, in the public imaginary, right, people think of these things as impossible, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh gosh, what is the first thing you're gonna say to our ancestors when?
So it started off from there, but I'm like, you know what? Just to make sure that the blind are not leading the blind.
Hey,
let me also speak to some people who are custodians of culture and like try to get a sense of what do they say about this and what do the people who got married say about what they went through and to try to find the connection of, is this actually real? You know, not to invalidate their lived experience, but as a form of trying to get a sense of, but from the cultural experts to explain to me what they did, how does it fit within the broader Isintu?
Exactly.
You know,
there's a corroboration.
Yeah. Was there certain things that were done wrong? Were there certain things that you are aware of that could have been done? Is there some form of history behind this?
And us have certain things been done correctly.
Yeah. You know, and also, but how do the ancestors, is there a way of like getting confirmation from the ancestors that, is it a thumbs up? You know, because there's an element of within we are all children and it comes with that humility. Even the oldest person, living person in the family goes to Msamo and asks because they are also children to abantu abadala.
Exactly. That's right.
So to say that as living people, I spoke to the cultural experts and I made a point that I also bring in people who have insight into the spiritual realm, you know, to be able to also guide in that we are not just inventing things that the ancestors perhaps might not approve of and we're just now pivoting and missing the essence of Isintu while we are growing and changing with Isintu, because queerness, and now let me move from queerness to same-sex relationships and intimacy and love have a long history on the continent, you know, much before colonial settlers arrived. You know, we did not call it gay, lesbian.
Whatever
the LGBT language came much later. Even the term sexuality and sexual orientation are very late. I think from like the 1800s, that's when the terms were invented. But the practice has a very long history on the continent. In Southern Africa, doing my readings for the research, I found that it was there, but it was a certain silence. It didn't have a name. It wasn't spoken about because more broadly, it was found to be disrespectful to speak about people's personal business and what they do in the bedroom with who.
And you have sayings like that of like, you know, some people be like, hey, angingeni. What people do in their homes, angingeni. And to some extent, you know, maybe it might have the you know what, maybe I don't want to talk about those things, but also it might have a requisite amount of like, you know, respect of like, you know what, I'll respect you and your privacy. And leave you alone with it, you know. Yeah.
So now bringing it back to now we're calling it a same-sex couple and putting marriage. That's when I went into the research, asking the people. So I had interviews. I interviewed the people who got married. Um, some of them came individuals, some of them came as couples to
Oh,
explain. So that was also
yeah.
really interesting. And I also spoke to cultural custodians. So these were people who, like, some of them were elders
Mm.
who I was just asking for insight as, okay, I have this question. You've lived much, much, much longer than me.
And you're much more acquainted with
Yeah.
Isintu than
And
I
you're
would be.
much
Yeah.
more acquainted to Isintu, even Isintu at a particular time, because Isintu changes over the
Mm.
eras. You have Isintu beyond what I've lived. So can you give me insight from Isintu that you know?
I think, there's something that I want to bring in. Uh, and this mainly has to do with heterosexual marriages,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the fact that heterosexual marriages tend to already be negotiated. Because,
Yes.
I mean, you spoke just now about how when, it was time to go to Zamo to get a sense of what am I going to say to Abantu Abadala, like, what am I going to say? Uh, in some ways, that does seem to be kind of like a shared experience, right?
Mm.
Because people come to be married under different kind of combinations and permutations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even within a heterosexual couple
Mm-hmm.
marriage, there's a potential marriage between someone from a different ethnicity, um, which also brings in certain kinds of complications, right?
Mm.
But there are also certain things around what do we actually do as Zulu people of this family, for
Mm.
example? Is our way of doing things going to be kind of appeasable to Abantu Abadala? Those kind of things. So I think in some way or another, we see that negotiation is always a constant feature
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to practicing Isintu, right?
Yes.
When it comes to, because I mean, more of the conversations around the elders is like, okay, how are we going to negotiate this
Mm-hmm.
marriage such that it reflects both our cultural kind of,
Mm.
I guess it reflects our cultures in one way or
Mm.
another, but also that it does exactly what it needs to be doing in terms of the cultural rights and practices.
Yeah.
So I think what we're seeing is that there's always a trying to figure it out,
Mm-hmm.
almost inherent in like the practice of marriage itself. So then it's like the question becomes, why is it then that when this kind of same negotiation, same trying to figure it out occurs in the realm of like a same sex couple trying to get married, then all of a sudden it becomes an issue. It becomes something to be, oh my goodness, what do we do with this?
So I think that in the work that we are doing, and not to step on any toes, because I feel like the work that has been done so far was needed and was essential to get us where we are.
Mm,
But right now, it is a point for us to re-indigenize queerness,
mm,
reclaim our place within our societies. Because
mm,
we love the rainbows, we love all of that, and we found international solidarity with it.
mm.
However, we've lost home. So
Oh,
now it's for me about us going back home to say, I'm not just a gay, I'm not just a lesbian, I'm not just a bisexual from nowhere.
mm,
I have a father, I have a mother, I
mm.
have family, I have
I have a
siblings, I have
community.
a community, I have ancestors. I
Mm,
belong here.
mm,
I belong in Africa.
mm,
I was born here. And
mm,
my roots are here. You can't separate me, which is another thing that we're talking back to the thing of Babungizwe. You can't separate me from who I am just because of my sexuality or my gender expression or gender identity.
mm. Oh, beautiful. Yo, you're giving me a lot to think about because there's this like theme of being estranged,
Mm,
And when we speak about estrangement, we say that someone was once, you know, part of the community, but
mm,
due to multiple factors, whatever factors they might be, they become strangers to a community. And the question is, what do we do with that estrangement of queer bodies, right?
mm,
To use the colonial language, as
yeah.
you're saying, or the more kind of externalized language.
Mm,
And I like that your work is kind of pushing us towards coming back home because I think as it stands, being outcasted, being estranged can make you feel like, there's no way back. So I think you're giving us ways to come back, which is good, you know. So, I mean, let's even look at this other dimension, which is, I mean, we touched quite a bit on, like, you know, the plasticity or the negotiations that happen within what's this, heterosexual marriages in isiZulu, right? In the Zulu culture. I'm interested in what you found
Yes.
when you are doing your research, because yes, you were doing your research on same-sex couples negotiating their way through their marriage practice, and I want you to give our audience insight into exactly how some of the processes went. I mean, you interviewed two, I think, same-sex couples, right?
Yeah.
So can you give us an insight into what happens as they go through the practice of needing to go to Zamo, you know, Batini? How do they get through this
So
process?
I think for me, I want to take it a step back
Okay.
because my first finding was a conceptual one, which was, but what is marriage? What is umshado?
Oh, okay.
You
Let's
know,
touch on that one. Yeah.
before we can go into how, and as particularly one of the experts explained it to me in a way that was really profound. They're saying in the West, when you're getting married, it's two people tying the knot and they are going to be with each other till death do us part. However, what we're seeing, it is the unification of two individuals, and it is the unification of two families, and it is the unification of two sets of ancestors, and it is the unification of two communities, all coming together for mutual benefit. You know, the mutual benefit, oftentimes from a heterosexual point of view, would speak of childbirth, procreation. It will speak of spiritual diversity, you know, because different families hold different gifts, if we can say that. You know, some perhaps would be Zangoma, and that is the spiritual heritage they come in. Some families are really good with farming. You just know that family there, anything they touch
I can already
just turns
think of
green,
one. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And when they come together, they share their talents, they share their skills, and the communities both benefit.
It's like a prosperity thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that is essentially what marriage is about. It's coming together, and it's not just till death.
Even
you know?
after.
It's forever.
Beyond. Yeah.
It's forever, from what I've heard.
You know what I like about what you just said? Not once did you make reference to heterosexuality as a key component in what makes a marriage, which is really, it's refreshing to hear, but yes.
So essentially, that is what I found marriage to be, which was like, okay, I did not see that coming. I thought I was just going to find the how, but apparently my what question was missing, and my assumption was wrong. Because, you know, living within a colonial moment, there's certain things that you also yourself get influenced in, which also brought me a mirror and to say, okay, I am not this researcher that is untainted, that's going to do this Africanization. I also need to interrogate some of the things that I know and I feel, and why and where they come from, and whose voice am I speaking from, you know? Going back into the juicy part, what I found.
What you found, yeah.
It was really interesting that the marriage was negotiated in very diverse ways. There was no one standard, and one of the experts even argued there isn't a standard because this previously was not done, in a sense, you know, with the exception of Izangoma, of course, which is a separate topic.
Which you can go into after this, yeah.
But essentially, people had same-sex desires since beginning of time, you know. However, previously it was a matter of your responsibility as an individual in the family, because you are not just going to exist as a single unit. You fall within a family, you form within a community, and your responsibility now that you are here on planet Earth with us is for you to procreate. And by procreating, there's also this thing of ukuvusumuzi kababa, because within the Zulu tradition particularly, the house that a male child builds is not their house. It's their father's house. And the house that their father built is not theirs, but it's their father's house. So there's some continuity that's happening there. So there's an expectation that you will now also uvusumuzi and have children and get married. And, the surname continues and we have enough children to be able to continue our family legacy. Going into same-sex couples, though, the expert told me, well, it wasn't there because the people who you are talking about oftentimes fit in within the heterosexual system. They would get married, they would have kids, sometimes even arranged marriages, because when they see that, hey, this one I got food. Arranged marriage will tell you just have 1 or 2 kids. What you do in your spare time, we will turn a blind eye.
Yeah.
But now came the idea of, okay, we are allowed to be now, and also technology has enabled that same-sex couples could procreate. So now we can theoretically
it's possible. You can have a surrogacy, for example.
So,
as people, I mean, even heterosexual couples do that, right?
Exactly.
If it's not marrying multiple wives, for example, or engaging in polygamy, some of them do take on surrogacy, for example, to meet their cultural demands.
And I mean, infertility is not just a same-sex couple issue. There are men who are infertile or struggle with fertility issues. There are women who also struggle with fertility issues. So this is not a new concept too.
Exactly.
It's nothing out of the ordinary, but the cultural expert brought to light that there isn't a set standard that this is what can or should be done, or this is what a lot of people do. So now we're going into a territory of Isintu reckoning with
itself and
this
the new setup and being kind of compelled to pivot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which also was brought in by our beautiful constitution that says, but you are allowed to be.
You're allowed to practice your cultural rights no matter who you are.
Exactly.
Right? Even if a queer individual is also protected in the sense of being allowed to practice their cultural rights, including the rights of marriage.
Exactly. So then now we're having, because I struggle to find queer voices, and because culture is co-created constantly, my question has always been, but where are the queer people who've been contributing to this thing,
creating
Isintu, because we are co-creating it all the time, and now, because of the moment we are in, because of the various things like the constitution, the time, and the technology, Isintu is now grappling with, okay, now queer people are coming in and they're making their voices heard and they're negotiating their place explicitly now within, because it was always a secret, it was always something hidden, something silent, but now we're like, okay, it's no longer that. It's, what was the point of us hiding? We're not living in those times anymore when that perhaps might have been needed. We can now, let's talk about this, So within that comes the question of, but why? Why do same-sex couples want to get?
Why do they even want this? I mean, let me actually pause that question of the why, right? Because there's something that I noticed in your work that was, to me, one of the most important things in terms of attempting to demonstrate the legitimacy of these marriages under like Isintu, where you were saying that same-sex couples go to Zamo at every part of the process. They speak to the ancestors. They ask for permission. They ask for guidance on how to do certain things. And obviously, as you said, when you go through rites of the rites of marriage, consulting umsamo is something that has to happen kind of constantly at every single part of the process. So there's a sense in which, even customarily, this marriage wouldn't have taken place, right, without these individuals getting the approvals that they needed and the guidance that they needed from abantu abadala, right? So there's a sense in which that, to me, is a very important dimension that we cannot kind of let slide, particularly because it demonstrates that in a lot of ways, who are we to say as the children of abantu abadala to say that this marriage shouldn't be the case when at every part of the process, it appears that, you know, the children of abantu abadala who are coming together in order to form this quote unquote unconventional union have nonetheless they've done what they needed to do to make sure that this marriage in the eyes of abantu abadala is something that is workable. So I think it's quite interesting that you mentioned, I mean, that in your research. But okay, let's go back to the question of the why. The why is it? And I think, you know, this is a very hard, I don't know, it's not a hard question, but it's much more like a fascinating question to grapple with, because some people might be like, queer people really love difficult things. Right? They love difficulty. They love going through it. Because why would you take yourself through all this when you could just go away with your civil union, sorry, and live your life without your family and all those kind of things? So why is it that we like difficult things, including like trying to negotiate our way through customary marriages?
You know, we need to understand that according to Isintu, sorry, marriage is a ritual, perhaps even a set of rituals, right? And the importance comes into when you were born. Different families do it differently. There's a ritual that is performed for you, you know, oftentimes to accept you into the family and introduce you. Okay, Bantamatala, this is the new child that is born, you know, this and this and this and this. There might be differences in terms of individuals, but structurally, oftentimes there's the birth ritual, then there's some type of coming of age that comes across. Okay, the child is now growing and we can see them and they've entered the stage of a maturity and this is what's happening, cool. Oftentimes, even now, more like within the current moment, it's okay, the child is leaving home, they're going to university, they're going to study, or the
At
child,
every stage, basically, of the child's development.
you know, the child is doing this. Okay, they found a job in, I don't know, Gauteng, they're going to live there, you know, please go with him, guide him, protect him. All right, now you find someone. Apparently, you have same-sex desires, you found someone, you really love this person, or whatever reason why you are marrying this person, but then you decide, okay, I want to live with this person. I am going to build a life with this person. And the problem is, the Nawanta are like,
what's happening now?
You told who? Like, Soya Zenzel, essentially, because now you're taking your everything into your own hands. Whereas
you should be consulting us.
Yeah, in every other step of the way, you've been letting the ancestors guide, you know, but now all of a sudden, which is also a form, could be interpreted as a form of disrespect. Because when you're not communicating with your family what you're doing, you've just went there to Johannesburg, to wherever, you've done whatever, you told your ancestors, no, I'm going to school. No, I'm going to a job. And now you are doing other things. And now it becomes a question of, but now you are lying to us. You are doing things and not consulting anybody, you know? And from what I've heard in my research, is that then, especially from the the conduits of culture. They're like, even in heterosexual settings, when you start doing fat and set, you will start seeing, oftentimes you'll start seeing problems in the relationships, unexplained fights, because it is not a physical, it is a physical manifestation of a spiritual problem. Because the ancestors are like, what are you doing? Why are you entering a stage alone? You know, why are you now doing this? Why are you, starting to do things that are expected of you in marriage while you have not? Here is this family, and we have not negotiated how we work together. So clearly there's going to be a sense of possession. They buy a house together. One set of ancestors is like, okay, this is my house. This is my house. The other one says, no, but my child put in the down payment. And then now it's going to be a fight. Things start breaking in the house and explained, all of that turmoil. That happens also within heterosexual setting, will also happen within a same-sex setting, because the problem is there was no ritual and the ancestors were not informed about what is it that is happening. So that becomes the crux of wanting to perform the rituals, to unite the families, to go home. And I think this, the negotiation starts with the couple negotiating with each other. Okay, so are we really doing this? No, it's like, are we really gonna do this? Is this on the table? Is this something that we can do?
Yeah.
If that is a yes, then it goes to this individual families. Like, hey, guys, I don't know if maybe the family knew about this person. They're like, you know the situation that I'm in. You know this person that I've been with. Yeah, we want to now enter
the right things.
How do we do it? Then it's negotiating with the different families. It's okay. First, you're a same-sex couple. Okay, cool. And this is our family, and this is how our family does things. What is this person? Okay. No, this person is Umkosa. No, this person Umtsonga. Okay. Which is also standard within
general negotiations.
General negotiations of, okay, this is how they practice it. No, then this, we need to do this. These are the steps that we're going to do on a Saturday to come together and discuss this and negotiate, because it is essentially just negotiation.
Hey, and that's what it is. And they call negotiations for a reason. Not just because we negotiate to ilobola, or like in contemporary terms, the price of ilobola. It's not just that. And I think a lot of the time people associate the term negotiation just with the fact that we're negotiating how much we're going to give. And as you write about as well, ilobola has much more significance, obviously outside of the financial implication, but also the entire process. Negotiation proper means that we are coming to terms. We're not necessarily imposing terms. We are coming to terms given the situation that we are in. So it seems like it's only fitting that, the same-sex couples' marriage would also be taking place under the same kind of precepts, right? Of coming to terms with this situation that we're in and how we grapple with it.
Yes, and it's unique even with heterosexual couples, because there's no one, because there is the standard, but then what I found in my research is that different families, they also have what they call imikuba, which is like, essentially, this is what our family does. It's not a general Zulu thing. It is a thing that our family, even if we share a surname, the surnames might have, okay, in this household, this is what they do. But in Uzulu, who lives in this particular household, this is what we do, which might be separate, And now, bringing in the element of same-sex couples, I oftentimes, within my research, found that most people who got married started off by also going to consult someone who has insight on the ancestors, who say, okay, look, we are two male-bodied individuals, we're two men, we're two women, we want to do this, but our ancestors, what are our ancestors saying about this? And this is now moving away from there's going to be a standard to it becomes really personal. experience because you and your ancestors are not going to be the same as someone else and someone
And
else's
their
ancestors.
ancestors.
So like, okay, cool. This is the situation. And from my research, I found that in some cases it was easy in the form of something that came out is something I've kind of termed as spiritual gender. You know, because you'll be like, okay, you are a male-bodied individual,
This
but
is for
spiritually,
Izangoma.
no.
Or even general.
Even in general, you know, Izangoma becomes much more exaggerated and much more visible. But you do find someone who is male-bodied, but they're dominated by a feminine ancestor. And then terms that the other person, the partner, is a male-bodied individual with predominantly a masculine ancestor. And this is something that one of the experts also said that they advised on. In that case, it becomes easy to now go speak to Lokok or that grandmother and go speak to that male ancestor, Lumkulu, and tell them, okay, let's use your gender in this and we'll just do a heterosexual thing.
Yeah.
You know, it becomes, okay, cool, it's fine. Ancestors agree, it's happy, sharp, heterosexual marriage, all the steps as is through.
Oh, interesting.
You know?
Yeah.
And then it comes to certain people who negotiated, went to Zangoma and spoke. Some not just Zangoma, but some went to a prophet. Like there's different types of people who have access into seeing into the spiritual realm and advising. Some people are, okay, cool. Your ancestors see what you are doing and they see that there's this woman in your life, but they are confused as to what is happening. You know, it's like, okay, they're like, no, they're just confused because this is not what they expected.
Explain, Nagalo.
So go to them, take him back or go home and ask them to explain, to say, okay, cool, which is a ritual called Ukpash, you know, going there and explain to like, hey, you know, I know that you had the assumption that I'm born in this body and you're fine, but it just so happens that this is the person that I really like. And this is the person that I want to spend the rest of my life with. And I'm asking of you to allow me.
Give me your blessing.
Give me your blessing because this is what would make me happy. You know, because essentially ancestors are not these ruthless, disembodied, you know, authoritative things.
And also like these people are just ready to punish you and kind of draw these lines and boundaries and assert lines and boundaries. Sometimes they can be generous.
Because these essentially ancestors are people who know you, who love you, who want the best for you, you know? And from that point of view, then the answer is like, okay, you know what? We don't know what this is. This is really new, but
for our child,
yeah, like if this is what makes you happy, it's fine. You know, some of them went to the extent of, okay, I'm a woman, but I feel more inclined to masculinity. So I'm asking that from during this process and from this point on within this union, I want to be the husband. I want to play the role of the husband, you know? And apparently, not my words, but theirs. They said after that, things just went smoothly. Like, there were first like conflicts, like things going
between
missing.
the couple,
not just the couple, but like in the process of trying to negotiate the marriage, there were like just hindrances happening. But as soon as they spoke to the answers, things just started falling into place. Like, oh, okay, cool. Because the ancestors are now playing their role that they need to play in the spiritual realm. Because as much as we are doing things physically, they also have a job to do spiritually on their side to do the things that needs to be done. So then now there's that synergy. They're like, oh, then things are falling into place. You know? They also went through that in a very heteronormative way, you know, because one then assumes the role wife, other assumes the role husband. They continue. They got their ancestors' blessing. Then came situations where some of them were
Abafuni to play into the role.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I was going to ask you as a follow-up question about, you know, is there an inherent pressure in Isintu to reproduce heterosexual roles in the queer or same-sex relationship. And I think in some way, you touched on it in a way that I think was very, I think, very productive when you're speaking about uvusumuzi, right? And the fact that uvusumuzi can take on different forms, that don't require kind of like this gendered way of performing, for example, procreation, or this kind of man-woman kind of scenario, right? That, well, it's possible, as you're saying, to get to Vusumuzuka Baba using services from a surrogate or whatever other kind of possibilities are out there. So I think that's quite interesting, because it brings in the idea that, a marriage can do what it needs to be doing also, right? Because I would assume that culturally marriage also has certain kind of purposes, and significances, as you've highlighted. So we can see that, of course, it's possible to do these things without necessarily having to replicate this kind of heterosexual dynamic, so to speak, as a necessary feature of our cultural practices. So, but I think some people would say that, well, they still feel this pressure to shape their relationships in a particular way in order to make them legible for the people, for their communities, for their families. That there's always going to be the question of who is the woman, who's the man, on those kind of things. So, what do you make of those kind of considerations? That is there an inherent pressure in Isintu
I feel
to shape
like
them that way?
we are living in a world where the norm, the standard, is person born with this body part. Person will grow up into a person who likes people who don't have this body part. Person then will like this person, get married, and then use their body parts to procreate. That becomes the norm, right? And because it is the norm, there's an assumption that everybody fits into it, or everybody should fit into it. Right?
And everyone should exercise their agency and subjectivity through those norms. Yeah.
Even for queer people themselves, we grew up being like around this. This is what you see on TV. This is what you see in your family. There's a lot of that
external pressure
coming in, But then there are people who said, hey, we don't want that for ourselves, which is like one of the couples that I spoke to. Actually, no, two of them, but the one was, I think the pseudonym I used was Polani, I think, an AB. Where they came together, they spoke to their families, they spoke to their ancestors, they had to do a ritual, which is, I think, similar to Ukpash, but it's called Ukshrelez. Only difference is that Ukshreleza are when you're like basically like you're begging or you're pleading. You plead when you are asking for something, or you're pleading when you've done something wrong and then you're asking for forgiveness. But those are pleading. So they were pleading with their ancestors to say, hey, look, this is the situation we're in. We're two men, and we are asking that you allow us and you bless us in the union. We want, then they mention the things that they want. They want a house together. They want to build a home, and this is what they want to do, and this is what they want to do. But also, they don't want it to be a sense of them losing their gender because there's this assumption that people who are attracted to the same sex, one of them or both of them are somehow less men.
And one of them has to kind of forego their manhood. However,
So with their negotiation, they said, okay,
we don't want to do
we
that.
like being men. We are fully men, we just happen to like each other as men, and we want to build together as men, and got to the point where the ancestors gave the green light to say, you know what, it's fine. You know? However, in this setting, then ilobola does not make sense because ilobola has a particular element of one person leaving their home into the other, but now you are saying that both of you are
Not
going
none
to
of
be,
yeah,
you
none
know,
of you are leaving your homes as such. You're
nobody,
forming two homes
you
in
know,
one home.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it became a matter of how do we now just put together? How do we negotiate to unite? You know, and for them, they did away with the element. They did negotiate. The negotiation was there, but not the exchange of ilobola. They
Yeah.
moved into the next stage, which is members. They continued. They did the slaughtering on both sides, and now they're married.
And you speak about their setup as well, of like how they negotiated the two males being in a relationship, neither of them leaving their homes. And can you give us some insights into what they were advised to do?
So with them, they were advised in their home. They have two separate Zamo. You know, I don't know if them being of separate cultures had also something to do with that, in the sense that with one of them, Zamo needed to be indoors. For the other, Zamo, according to their family, is a place outdoors. So they have an indoor place and they have an outdoor place, right? But now they have been introduced, according to their culture, into each other's families fully, you know. There was this motoring to do that, which inyongo, for some people who don't know what it is, it's essentially, I would say, a gallbladder. But the word gallbladder then undermines what it is. It's the most sacred part of any ceremony that has to do with slaughtering, you know. So if Utele Nyong'o, it becomes like a form of spiritual, they call it a spiritual GPS. To say the ancestors can locate you, they can,
I see.
you know,
Okay.
you'll be able to be recognized, you know. So they did that on either side, and now they can also be in the space together. So their homes were, as two in Zamo, they use a double barrel surname. And if I'm not mistaken, if they ever had kids, the kids would then take the double barrel because it's like bavuse two imizi at the same time. So both of them fulfill their cultural expectations or their cultural requirements while still within their same-sex relationship.
You know what's so fascinating about this? Because what your work also does, it really makes us question what are the essential features of Isintu. What are the essential features? And, you know, for a long time, and especially by figures who take themselves to be cultural custodians who are also homophobic, right? They carry this notion that culture is essentially expressible through the patriarchy. It's almost like essentially expressible through heterosexuality, through gender binaries, through everyone knowing their role and their place, you know. But what I'm seeing is that, you know, first through the negotiation aspect, through, you know, there are other things that seem to be important that such that when they are expressed, they already kind of demonstrate working within Isintu, right? So if it's not heterosexuality that makes the culture as such, or Isintu as such, if it's not gender binaries that make Isintu as such, if it's not procreating from your own loins that makes Isintu as such, what is it that makes Isintu, at least as you found when you're doing your research?
What makes Isintu? Within my work, and I'm not claiming to know Isintu, I would label myself as a lifelong learner
Of course,
of
as you
Isintu.
should. As you
You know,
should.
every day I learn something new, but I think something that has been fundamental within Isintu, and I think every time I learn, it takes me back I was blessed to be able to spend time with my grandparents, and they would drill something into me. Inhlonipho.
Isintu, inhlonipho.
Inhlonipho, respect. You know? Essentially, everything boils down to respect. You are doing these rituals and stuff.
Why?
Out of respect for your ancestors, for your family, for the people who raised you. You know, you are living in a certain way in relation to nature because of what respect. So I find that that is one pillar that I'm finding in Isintu. And the second one is Ubuntu. Ubuntu, moving beyond the Ubuntu, yes, let's just be happy and jolly and whatnot. But Ubuntu as a praxis of humanity, as a praxis of personhood, to say that your personhood is not just of you being an individual who just happened to breathe like everybody else, but your personhood comes in serving your community, serving your family. We live for others and others live for us. This is how we survive. This is how we are human. We are human because we work together, you know, in the same way that you can gain Ubuntu. We often heard, and I also grew up hearing, that person does not have Ubuntu. They're not a person because they've lost this essence of what it is to be umuntu, that servitude to the greater collective, you know? So within that, I think there is some element of Isintu manifesting.
Well, there is an element. I mean, I was going to say that if we understand Isintu as inhlonipho and Ubuntu, the way in which these same-sex couples have nonetheless chosen to go through their practices has always been in consultation with their ancestors, with their families, to some extent with their communities. They try to be as respectful as possible, right? But also realize that their cultures are also rather Isintu, again, because of the very important distinction sometimes that we need to draw. Because they understood that Isintu itself is something that, you know, allows for negotiation, but also allows for respectful negotiation. It allows for arriving at a particular kind of point, given the situation that they find themselves in. So, of course, you know, but as you're saying, mainly because they seem to have respected the basic tenets, what essentially makes Isintu, which is Ihlonipho and Ubuntu. It seems like their marriage was accordant with Isintu, right? So where what more do we really need to say? You know, what more do we really need to say? I think there's something along those lines, right? If Isintu is about inhlonipho, it's about Ubuntu. How do we make sense of homophobia again, right? That is harbored by Ubaba Ngizwe Mchunu as homophobia that is grounded in Isintu and, you know, this notion of protecting our culture. We cannot allow these homosexuals to desecrate our culture. How does that kind of, you know, come into the picture now that we have this understanding of Isintu as grounded in inhlonipho and Ubuntu?
You know, I've been asking myself that question quite a lot recently because I don't know. I've never engaged with Isintu that demands of one to swear at other people, that demands of one to say one does not deserve to belong, that does not deserve to be, you know, that the type of Isintu that incites violence on people who are just living, civilians essentially, you know, people just trying to make ends meet, do their life in the best way that they know how. I don't know the Isintu that asks of us to harm those people who are just trying to make it work. And a question that I've had in the back of my mind was, the couple did not decide to get married and start the process on their own, because ngokwesintu, you can't, you know? They most probably were in consultation with their families, with their elders, with their ancestors, and it is them who start the process. This is them who are the ones who facilitate the whole process. And if it is essentially that they did something wrong, why are we not swearing and cursing at the elders of that family? Why are we not cursing at the ancestors that allowed that to happen?
Because they were all involved in
They
the
were all
process.
involved, you know? The person was getting married as a part of their clan, as part of their family, you know? Dressing up, uvunul, you know? You are no longer just a representation of yourself. And I think I get a sense of that from what Ngizwe is saying, is that you are now, what he is saying is, you are now desecrating us, because when more vulnerable, it's no longer just about you as an individual, it's about the greater collective. Makavunulile. He was now part of the greater collective of his family. He was a representation of his family. He was standing in for his family. Why do we now choose to selectively want to individualize the problem? Because according to Isintu, there is no individuals. We are all part of a bigger system. Why target the individual? Because if there is a wrong, and this is a big if there is a wrong, then the person who has a problem should take it up with the elders.
The people who were involved in the entire process until upon the actual couple came into the picture.
Even want to argue, you need to take it up with the ancestors who allowed it. Because the ancestors are fundamental, because even the elders consult with the ancestors. You'd have to go to them and they're like, yeah, why do y'all allow this? Why do y'all accept this? Assuming that the ancestors accepted, but why do y'all accept this? And another question I ask myself, and that came through my research, is who are you to ask that question? You know,
as exactly. Like, who are you to ask that question?
As someone who is not a part of the family.
Oh yes, also.
You are in your own family doing your own things. This family decided, okay, we see the situation we're in. This is how we are going to go about it. This is our child. This is our grandchild. This is our great-grandchild. This is our nephew, niece, whatever. This is how we are going to choose to support them in living their lives to their fullest. We are giving them the blessing. Continue
and
doing
throughout, that blessing is grounded in Isintu anyway. Yeah.
So then now, for someone from somewhere else coming in and wanting to dictate what a family does, for me is really wild, because on what grounds are you standing on to be able to go to a different family who uses a different surname and want to dictate what it is that they and their ancestors have decided and what they have done? Because again, marriage is a ritual. And if the ancestors have approved, who are you to say anything about it?
I think that's a powerful note to also end off on. And I think, this conversation has touched on a lot of things that are very important, mainly because we know that, homophobia is still a prevalent thing on the continent. We are grappling with the fact that, as we were saying earlier, the assumption, rather, that Africanness and homosexuality are incompatible. These things are grounded in so many kind of histories, assumptions. And I think a lot of the time, it's very easy to play into those narratives, right? But I think what your work is demonstrating to us is that, especially through centering Isintu as something that is both negotiated, but also something that is grounded in certain kind of values. We see that heterosexuality doesn't need to be a core tenet of Isintu, right? Gender binarisms of being a man or a woman don't need to be certain kind of central tenets of Isintu. Rather, it's more about how you seemingly negotiate yourself through those rites and passages, rites of passage, right? And effectively see what you can do with what you have as a situation in order to meet your obligations as well in your community. So I think what we're demonstrating here is that, you know, there is a possibility, there is room to bring in same-sex couples into the fore. Potentially, this is the moment of grappling with where Isintu goes, you know, in a lot of ways. Where Isintu goes, making sure that wherever it leads us in this kind of more particularized expressions, wherever it leads us, it's still grounded in inhlonipho and ubuntu, right?
I need to say that
Yes.
the most powerful activism I've seen start, and I hope it continues. I think I saw it a bit last year, but also a lot during Soweto Pride this year. Fathers came.
Wow.
And they said, this is my child. Parents came and said, this is mine. If you have a problem with them, start here.
Come to me.
I gave birth to this person. This person is a part of me. So if it is that they did something wrong, that you want to beat them or you want to kill them or whatever, start with me, the person who gave birth to that. And for me, that was powerful. It is a remembering that we are a part of a greater collective, regardless of who we are.
I love that because you're showing that, you know, with that estrangement, some people still have homes. And, you know, there's something important about your home also reclaiming you. And I think maybe you're right that, you know, activism has to go even beyond the kind of the people who embody those quote unquote sexualities and different genders, but it has to be grounded in a broader community and people really also understanding the responsibilities that they have to people who have same-sex attraction as members of their community, right? That aspect of inhlonipho and ubuntu, again, involves us also being treated as human beings, as part of the community, as people who also have certain kind of, you know, I think shared rights and shared rights of protection and home, of feeling at home in, I guess, in your culture, even in your community. So I think this is this is absolutely phenomenal. And thank you so much, Zamo, for coming.
No, thank you for the invite. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah. All right. That's it.